Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of The Source of the Sauce with myself, Marianne Mills, and our guest today, Cathy Long. Thanks for joining us, Cathy. You definitely win brightest hair of the bunch of us. Well done.
Indeed.
Yeah.
I've never gone that red. I do red. It doesn't look very red at the moment.
I've been that red before now in my life.
You've done
You
the
have
red.
beads in your hair as well, though.
I had beads in my hair. I had bright purple, lime green at one point.
I did have like really, really short blonde hair at one stage. There aren't many photos that exist of that era. But
there you go.
It's hard to imagine now. Yeah.
Exciting stuff. There you go. There's some of you watching this now or watching it on repeat when it goes out thinking, no, surely not. These people look completely sensible. They never would have had hair like that. Well, you know, we've all had periods in our lives when we had to experiment with hair.
Yeah.
I never paid to have my hair dyed though. That's the thing. I never paid anyone to do it. Yeah. Just always did it out of a box over a bath and probably stained a few baths along the way.
I did.
I paid an award-winning hairdresser once to dye my hair. And long story short, it turned out that his award was for designing a hairdressing salon.
Oh.
That was his expertise. And my lesson I took from that is the devil is in the detail. Always ask, because he had no clue what he was doing in dyeing my hair. And it went a very strange colour. So when anyone says to me, I've won an award, I'm like, what for exactly?
I love that. Do you know what? Before we start on anything else, there's definitely a lesson to be learned in there.
There is, isn't there? I didn't think to ask. I first met him when he was celebrating winning this like scissors award thing, and everyone was lauding him as this amazing hairdresser. He'd won this competition to get his whole salon redesigned. I was like, oh, you must do my hair. No.
Before you pay anybody money,
Mm-hmm.
when there's someone, when someone says they're an award winning, just what have they won? You know, because, you know, it can be very dubious. But there you go. Cathy, thank you so much for being here today. Now, you've created some stuff. Let's go back in time, though, first. And before you talk to us about the app and everything else like that you're involved with, which you're going to, you know, reveal to us all in a bit. Where have you got to this point from? Where did you start? You know, when you first started work and whatever, what was it that you did?
So I started off working in music on like music fanzines and live events and lots of cool stuff. Always wanted to just, you know, be in the music industry really and do cool things.
What went wrong then?
And what went wrong? Doing some very serious things. Well, what went wrong was football safety went wrong. So the Hillsborough disaster was where it started for me.
Right.
That I guess I don't know what point I became obsessed with it, but I think I did at some point become obsessed with football safety. And I think for me, when I look back, justice was always about it never happening again.
Yeah. Like
I've always been really passionate about the truth being understood about these disasters and what really led to them. Because if you make up your own version of what happened, that's damaging for a lot of people, but also it means you don't learn the right lessons and you don't fix it and it happens again. Yeah. And for me, one of the big problems with Hillsborough and sort of the lies that were spun about it was the fact that these disasters continue to happen around the world because people just thought it was the fans' fault and didn't realize there was some serious shit that they needed to fix. So I got really involved in campaigning. Just like as a volunteer with like the Football Supporters Association and like, you know, editing their newsletter as a youngster and all of that. But eventually I was then freelancing, not just in music, but in football. And I worked on Euro 2000 on their fans embassy, which is a really interesting experience.
Wow. Yeah.
We set up these embassies for fans in an attempt to sort of, you know, if you improve the experience for fans, guess what? You'll get better outcome. So it's persuading, like, you know, Belgian mayors and Dutch police and all the rest of it at that stage to treat people a bit better. The Dutch were very good at it.
Oh, the Dutch have always been great with people.
They were great. That the Belgians struggled a little bit more. Yeah, and then the Premier League said to me, come and decide who you're working for because you're freelancing for all of us. We want you on our side. And I was like, I don't know about that. quite nice to throw stones from the outside and just tell you what to do rather than fix it from the inside. But yeah, I fixed it from the inside, and I was there for about 15 years. But I still saw all these problems around sort of safeties, and particularly around like safety briefings, and the way that people who are like most people who work at a football club or any concert or gig or whatever are temporary workers. Like 96% of people who work in this field are just coming in.
Can we, for anybody who is a layman and they don't understand what a safety briefing is, just kind of unpack that for a second?
The really basic stuff of being people told what their job is on the day and what they are there to do. So people will often be like, sometimes you'll get a mix of people working these events. So sometimes if you're new to it, you literally will be, you'll turn up and be given a badge and a high vis, you know, and told to go and stand over there and hold that rope, you know. And as I'm often pointing out, yeah, but the people holding that rope are going to get asked a load of questions by the public because they're in high vis. So, you know, anyone who's worked in these roles knows you get asked a load of questions because you've got high vis and a lanyard on, and people want to know where's this, where's that, and you're not making eye contact.
Where's the queue for the? Where's the toilets? How do I get in? Well, is there disabled access? All of this sort of thing.
It's commonly asked question at Notting Hill Carnival is how do I get to Paddington from here? And it's not even the nearest tube station, but it is at Carnival. And the people that they're asking are policemen who have come from all over the city, from outside of London, who have been shipped in because nobody else wants to do it, or people who've been brought in. So it's everything from like communicating, you know, how to deal with the questions they're going to get asked, and also what their role is on the day. And even down to some of the training as well. I think, you know, I'd see safety briefings, which is literally like, if you go to an event and if you're there early, you'll see a group of people like sitting in the seats or something in the rain while the sprinklers are being tested and the PA is being tested. Someone's trying to deliver like a briefing of what to expect on the day, and you can't even hear it. And I was like, this is just mad.
Yep.
How does anyone know what they're doing? And I thought, well, if I was managing one of these events, I'd want a full audit trail of this.
So who just tell me this, who was managing them? Because I think we sort of get this idea in lots of things that people know what they're doing and it's being held together by someone, whoever someone is. And there often isn't a someone. Was there a someone, or was it?
Yeah, I mean, you know, all events will have a safety officer and someone, you know, depending on the size of the event, you know, there'll be somebody who's in charge. But usually they're in charge of a lot of things on the day.
Yeah.
So they're partly in charge of the people, but they're also in charge of all of these other things.
Yeah.
I know when I spoke to someone the other day, they were saying about it. And I thought, wow, that's a massive, when I'd heard that role talked about, it kind of doesn't do it justice. When I heard Eileen I was speaking to, and I was like, wow, that's like a lot.
Big event companies who have got like 6 people as their core staff working all the year round, and then hundreds, maybe even thousands that come in and work on a temporary basis, and they've suddenly got to manage all of that. Well, you know, I want to try that.
A long time ago, I used to work for the Festival Radio Association as a volunteer, but I was their chair as well. And we used to do a lot of events that were outside events. And this was before the internet happened and before things like smartphones and things like that. So, you know, people could only be contacted by like CB radio, etc. And you know, the more spread out anything is, you know, as you say, that the people that are in charge and organizing something, they're organizing so many things, and that you used to see a lot of people not necessarily disseminating things or putting other people in charge of particular areas. So they'd be you know, it'd still have to go back up the chain to this person, and you'd be running around, literally running around.
People are literally running
a 4-mile area trying to find this person to go, oh, someone's needing to put a toilet in over there.
Yes.
Can you go and speak to them, because there's no pipe over there, or there's no water supply or something, and it is madness.
They're reacting and troubleshooting all of the time. There's just always things that they have to respond to.
And then if you add into the fact, like you said, 96% of them are temporary workers. It's not like you ever. I know I work in the care sector as well, and that's a similar sort of problem, that you've got a lot of temporary staff, you've got a lot of agency staff. So even having worked in homes, it was a nightmare, because then the people that are permanent end up taking on a lot of the stress of it, because they're the ones that are there all the time, so they know, and then everybody else then doesn't really know what they're doing. Even though they do know what they're doing, even though they actually know the role. And then there's friction between both sides, between the temporary and the agency. And I'm assuming it's probably the same kind of.
Oh, completely. And then you've got lots of agencies that subcontract to other agencies, and the whole thing gets really messy. I remember back when I was at the Premier League, we were talking about this issue around like stewarding and all of the match day staff, and talking to somebody, and we were saying, it's the way they're doing things. It's not really very Premier League. It's not the behaviour we want to see. It's not how we want matches to be, And they said, well, if you told them what that looks like.
No,
actually. And then we realized, because there's all these layers between like you as the Premier League or the competition organizer or whatever, and the people who are actually out there. And I never like to see it as top down. I always like to see it inside out. Like you're sitting in the middle, and people have all these like navel gazing meetings about our ethos and our values and how we want to be. No one's told the guy on the car park.
No.
No,
absolutely.
They don't know, because no one's seen it as important to tell them, and it's absolutely vital to tell them, because they're the people that are going to actually, meet the customers, talk to the fans, whatever. And if they're not treated well, you can't expect them to respond well.
So before we get in, go on then.
Can I just ask one thing, which sort of I don't think you were at the event the other day, so I met you through the Women in. Well, I haven't met you. I sort of virtually have met you through the Women in Security group. Yeah. Which is great for me, sort of wanting to go into that moving more into that sector. And the event we went to the other day was International Women's Day. Did you find then that making your voice known, like when they said, have you told them what you want it to look like? Number one, that's going to be hard when you've got those layers. It's going to be hard anyway, because any of us know. Was it harder as well being a female in a particularly male world as well?
I think it is now. Weirdly now more so then, but that's partly because then I was the fortunate position of having a particular role at the Premier League where people did, and it commanded respect, and I command respect because I built that respect in the sector. So I was dealing with people that knew me and respected me, and I didn't find that a challenge. But what I have learned is that I've learned two things lately. One is that as you go into other sectors, it's different because people don't know who you are. So you're starting again, having to prove yourself. And the other thing is that I've realized is that I don't know what it's like to be a man in this situation.
Yeah.
So I don't know the difference. And I have been in meetings with colleagues, male colleagues, who have told me that they think they were spoken to differently from how I was, and they were afforded more respect. And I hadn't noticed it.
Wow.
And by you?
Yeah, they felt, because I'm just used to that. Like, it's this really weird thing, right? If you've always been a woman, you don't know how it would be. Like, that's just what I'm used to.
Yeah.
And I think that's what respect looks like. But they were like, actually, they pointed out that they were asked sort of the technical and the finance and the tough questions, if you like, and I wasn't.
Wow.
Right.
And they were actually batting those questions back to me because they were saying, well, you need to ask the boss.
I do love it. Earlier on, we talked about this. We talked about this today, about how men have to start calling that sort of behaviour out.
And he did, which was amazing. Yeah.
Ask her, because she's the one that knows, not me.
At the time, I honestly didn't notice it. I was thinking, you answer that question. Why do I have to do all the work? And then he told me afterwards, and I was like, oh my God, you were actually being a real ally then. I tell you something else that happened to me is that we got cold called by one of the biggest clients that we could possibly get in the security world. en masse one week. But long story short, the meeting kept moving, the online meeting. And then when I turned up at the online meeting, there was no one there. And it was really weird. And it turned out that, as they put it, the man who emailed me put it, he had moved the meeting to earlier that day. And he told everyone who was due to be in the meeting, but he hadn't told me. I'm like, but I'm the chief exec and I'm the founder. Who else was due to be in the meeting? And then I realized it was because he thought the other people needed to be in the meeting and I was setting it up because I was the admin.
Wow.
And we missed out on a huge contract because they didn't invite me to my own meeting.
I mean, it's not right.
There we go.
Yeah.
Crazy. I was going to take you back to what you said right at the start about, you know, Hillsborough being like the catalyst for this, because and I want to know from your perspective if you think things have in some ways got better, because I just kind of remember Hillsborough in amongst a load of other disasters that seemed to just be happening all the time as I was growing up on the telly. You know, if it wasn't Hillsborough, it was Zeebrugge, or it was, you know, there were lots of different,
and they were around the same time,
and they were all around the same time, and it seemed to be that it couldn't have been necessarily sort of a tech thing that, you know, suddenly we were bringing in new things and that was causing it. It just seemed to, I don't know. What do you think kind of brought all of that culmination of stuff happening?
I think there was a different attitude then. No, certainly in football, there was a completely different attitude towards football fans. But I would say completely different in this country. I would say it's not always changed in other countries, and it's partly because they didn't really understand what had happened to Hillsborough. So again, they didn't fix the right things. They just thought it was sort of somehow bad behavior, and didn't realize that you just shouldn't, you know, condense people into small areas, because then they can't breathe. And, you know, we still see that happening in, like, that's happened in streets, in shopping centers, at, you know, festivals, events, you know, this thing.
Was it part of kind of an increased access thing, do you think? I mean, like, you know, historically, like, there was a lot of things that were only accessible to the rich. and then suddenly and maybe it swung back the other way to some degree now, but there was a point where, like, suddenly, you know, more people were going to things, and more people were traveling, and more people were doing this, and more people were doing that, and we hadn't necessarily moved the benchmarks on any of these things to accommodate the fact that
that was partly the case. But I think, I don't know enough about Zeebrugge, which is an interesting one because it was around the same time. But I think generally there was just less care and attention, and I think there was less oversight. And I think there's more oversight now. And, you know, to some people that can make it difficult to hold events, you know, because you've got to have proper licenses for things and you've got to do things properly. And I think it's really tricky. I've always said, like, at the Premier League, my job was to sort of keep the pot simmering but not boiling over. Like, football's supposed to be exciting. You're supposed to be able to celebrate a goal. Like, I had a battle for ages with some of the safety authorities, because they basically were saying that that people needed to sit down, like, all of the time at a football match, and it wasn't safe for them to, like, celebrate a goal. Or actually, exactly. They decided it was actually statistically safe to stand and celebrate a goal, but not to stand
have them like on a roller coaster with a.
Yeah, you know, it's absolutely ridiculous. And it was, they were looking at data wrongly, so they didn't understand any of it. And I think hopefully now there's much better understanding there. But yeah, I pointed out that actually it's not the people that are wrong, it's the stadium.
Yeah. So often,
you know, like, if you can't celebrate the goal safely, then the stadium is wrong and not the people.
So the design is at fault.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, and they've done things like bringing in rail seating. It's a whole other point, because I don't know if that's actually necessarily the answer or necessary.
And it's a two-way design as well. It's a physical design, I'm presuming. I mean, you know, some of my background's sort of in ergonomics and office design and stuff like that. And so the two elements which would be the environmental design. Probably some of that was wrong, but then probably procedures and like the way that we do things, they were wrong as well. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I think over the years was a big mixture, and some of the things. I mean, if I remember correctly, Zeebrugge was basically that the door was left open, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Correct.
And the thing is, errors can always happen, and there will always be human error. And it's about limiting those as much as possible, and it's about there being that care and that oversight so that is spotted.
I think a lot more now. Like again, when I think back to my experience working with care and having worked training in that area as well. When I first started out, 17, 16, I think it was, I had my training. Can't really even remember what that was like, but what I do know is that I was very quickly went out with other more experienced older carers, of which then it would be, don't worry about it, do it this way. And then you're left going, oh, do I do it their way because they've been here a long time, or what do I do? But I also look at all the risk assessments that, I do the risk assessments, all those kind of things, that there just weren't as many, like you said, there weren't as many checks. It just wasn't as stringent. I worked in medication. We looked at medication policies and things. And there just weren't, there wasn't as much out there. I think left a chance, really.
I feel like generally, certainly, like fans are treated better, not in every respect, not in pricing and certain other ways, but generally, there's more and better understanding of crowds, but not completely. But I still think that workers aren't treated well enough, and that's a big part of the problem, and I still think there's a long way to go in people understanding crowds and crowd management. The UK Crowd Management Association has done a lot of work on this, on trying to improve the language that is used when these things are reported, so that people don't talk about there being a stampede, because people actually don't stampede. It's a thing that animals do.
They're just doing it because if they, like you say, they're paying to go to an event, a lot of money. I should say, I don't know because I don't watch football.
Well,
but
even if they're not, you get these things that have happened in, like, there was one in the street, I think in South Korea, where it's just that there are just too many people in the street. And generally, crowd rushes don't happen with a big rush and a stampede and a big, fanfare and a load of noise. It's actually a really sort of silent killer. It's just that gradually people are getting more and more compressed. I mean, it's horrible to even think about or describe, but that's what happens, and it's what happened to Hillsborough. It's what happens at these events and places where you just literally get too many people that have been crammed into one space, and then you get a bottleneck and people can't breathe and people can't move. And it doesn't take long for us just to not be able to move.
What's the big O2? I'm not know at Wembley. I can't remember which one it was. We went to see Green Day, and then when we came out, I was so impressed with. I mean, you had that many people coming out, and it was just incredible that they had people going through. This was like outside, going through in like stages, I suppose. It was just incredible. There was no bad feeling. People were like energized. Because the bigger problem was when you went to get on the tube. Of course.
Well, I was just about to say, because I've done that. Yeah. And then you find like you get, but that's to do with, now that's interesting, isn't it? Because like, obviously they rebuilt Wembley, because I remember going to the old Wembley and being stuck in that car park for hours getting out after Genesis, back in the day. And then, new Wembley, as you say, in terms of like the sort of bit that funnels into Wembley, they did a great job of designing that, and where the speaker systems are to keep people, you can't drink in that bit coming in and out of it, which is really, really good. But then you hit the old infrastructure of the tube stations, which, haven't been updated massively since they were built eons ago, and suddenly that well-organized, well-oiled machine suddenly hits this, and it can't go any further. I saw it going back a fair few years ago now. I remember waiting at Wimbledon station to try and get on the train at Wimbledon station back to the southwest when Wimbledon was on, and someone from you know, an organization who you might think have got something to do with trains. I won't name them, but you know who I'm talking about, came out and said, oh, we forgot that Wimbledon was on. Haven't put enough trains on, you know, and you just think, so that's what interests me. It kind of the comms piece in this as well.
Yeah.
How much of this goes wrong because, you know, one organization doesn't communicate with another, or one party.
I mean, so much of it, and like the data isn't shared, you know. There's been some really interesting research, by the way, that talks about, you know, that thing you talk about Green Day coming out and everyone's happy and everyone's in a good mood and all of that, and then it changes when you get into the transport system. There's also different behaviors. So when people have a common purpose, so they all like the same band, so they've all been to the same gig, they all support the same football team, or they've been to the same event or whatever. The common purpose means people look after each other. So you're safer in that sort of a crowd because people will literally take care as they'll help you down the stairs. They'll move out of the way for you. Everybody does this thing of we're all a crowd together and we're all
we've all been to that, and now we're all coming out to this. Yeah.
Shopping centres, transport, completely different because there isn't the common purpose. So if something goes wrong in those environments, it can actually be much more tricky because everyone acts like an individual in that circumstance and is looking out for themselves because they don't feel any connection with other people. But it's really interesting you say about that, the connection, because one of the pieces of work we're doing is bringing data together from different data sets to sort of democratize it for event planning. So looking at different regions and where, for instance, like a combined authority or a council might have data from Google or mapping or whatever. Like when they had big issues at Wembley with the Euros a few years ago, the phone companies knew there was a problem before Wembley did because of the phone mass data, because they could see the movement of people. So this is nuts. And we're going, right. So everybody needs to be able to access this data, and it all needs to be in the same platform so that you can analyze, and then you can look back if something went wrong and go, well, how many people were in that area? What was the movement of people? What was the weather like? You know, bring all of this together. When there was the Liverpool Football Club Champions Parade, just thought I'd get that in. Liverpool Football Club Champions, just say that again in case anyone didn't hear that. Last year, obviously there was a terrible incident with a car driving into the crowd. If that hadn't happened, the big news story would have been that there were thousands of people stuck outside Lime Street Station that night who couldn't get onto trains, and there were empty carriages, and there were simply too many people. And again, the data hadn't been matched up, so probably too many people had bought open return tickets because everyone was coming in. They had Radio 1 big weekend in the city. It was a bank holiday weekend. Liverpool won the title early, so people had plenty of time to plan. So they had literally like 1 million people coming in. And then the station just said, actually, we can't let anyone in. It's not safe.
So tell us what you're doing to fix the world.
So what we're doing to fix the world. So that's one thing we're doing to fix the world, is bringing all of that data into one place so that event organizers can get access to it. So the venues would never be able to afford that data. But again, if we democratize it into one platform, then actually they can access data that would be really useful for them. And also the people planning these events can have more information themselves, you know, and cities can have more. But the first platform we built out was the Aposto staffing platform, which is, Aposto comes from the Italian phrase tutto posto, which literally means everything in its place. And it's used to say, like, you know, we're ready now. So if you're in a cafe and you're leaving or your food's just arrived, they will say like tutto posto, or often just Aposto. And our thing is getting people ready to work. So that's our theme, really. And one thing we realized is we've designed something that means that people can access temporary jobs at events or football clubs or festivals or even construction sites or wherever. They can get scheduled in, you know, they get a digital skills passport that they can take anywhere else. So if they've worked one event, it goes with them to another event. We issue with them like digital briefings, so really smart briefings that we really work on how to help them actually understand very quickly what it is they need to do, because this isn't something you've got a long time to do. You may have been told you've got the job on Wednesday and the event is at the weekend. So it's like really short sort of training that's needed in the app. And then also workers can give feedback and they can, you know, say what it's been like and what their experience has been like. But something that's been really key for us is there's a really high proportion of people who do these jobs who are dyslexic. There's a really high proportion who don't have English as a first language, There's a really high number of people who will simply say, I'm not that good with my reading and writing. They won't necessarily be diagnosed as dyslexic, but they've often struggled in mainstream education because it's just not suited them. And it makes sense, because then you go into jobs where you can just deal with people.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
If you a safety briefing, and it's like a load of A4 sheets of paper in tiny type, like tables and graphs and all sorts of stuff on it. And it's, to most people, it's indecipherable.
It's interesting you say it, because I know that when I've done train the trainer for, again, all different sectors, that bit doesn't very often get picked up on. So number one, I'm trying to train people, but often in one group actually I had. So again, I think security, care, and construction, high levels of
All of those
English. English isn't a first language, and university. So I then highlighted, I said, out of the 9 people that I had that I was training, only one of them had English as their first language. I was like, for a start, me getting through all of this, I've had to work really hard to get through it and do it a good job. I said, but then those people are then going to be training, which I had no concerns about their English. But what often gets forgotten about is whatever it is they're doing, whatever it is they're training, what about the people that English isn't their first language? It's all very well, and I think all too often that training is seen as something where we just give the information and we make the assumption that it's been taken in. I mean, cultural differences often don't get taken into consideration. A colleague of mine said quite often if he knows, there's been times when he's been teaching or training African carers, and he said culturally they are very laid back about it. They'll come in 2 hours later and there's not a problem, and he's like, I'm really sorry, but you're not going to be able to. I know you're here, but you've missed 2 hours. So he's had to sort of factor that in, because it's about you actually taking this in a way that is meaningful. And it's really good that when I said to you about what my interest with neurodiversity is, that you can't just assume. I mean, that's Graham's favourite word, that assuming. You can't assume that just because you've given it, and then you're dealing with people's lives. You know, I talked about this today. Well, I was speaking to somebody that's a beekeeper yesterday. He does beekeeping and bee removal. Somebody else that deals with trees, and I said, every thing that somebody deals with is important to them, but actually quite often along the way there's something safety wise that, do you know what I mean, that sometimes it can be life and death. So he was saying about honey, that there's a lot of honey that if the bees aren't kept correctly, that then will affect the honey, which in Scotland now the authorities have the right to come in and seize produce. So you kind of don't. I was like, wow, I didn't even know about this sort of stuff. So it then becomes something that seems a bit of a hobbyist thing, which is why he's moving to make it like an accredited thing, to something that actually potentially is life and death. And so I'm always really sort of shocked, but maybe not shocked, but should be
disappointed.
But when people's like literally in terms of safety, that things are left to chance. So I think it's brilliant. I love these when something can be in an app. We're just speaking to somebody in the construction sector that's doing the same thing. When everything's done in this app, we all do things on our phone now.
Yeah, exactly. And we're working with some construction companies now. It's really interesting because they have the same problem. And one of the sites told us they have up to 40 languages are spoken on site at any one time.
Wow.
And somebody died because they didn't understand the safety briefing.
I know that I had somebody that I've forgotten what they do, when they do the signalling. I don't know what they're called.
Yeah.
Maybe I don't know what it's called. So this guy did a micro teach on that, and he was saying again, he was starting up his own business, coming out from doing what he was doing that training, because it was a massive problem, because it was the assumption was made that these people understood. So you've got the person that's in the vehicle. It's not a guardsman, it's not a signsman, I can't think what it is. But there was a misunderstanding of what the signalling was. And people like
that's so dangerous.
Cranes. The other thing that, with cranes, and then people saying, well, if somebody has somebody with them on their training, if their English isn't their first language, what then happens when you assess them to be competent? Because of equality and diversity, are they allowed to have an interpreter with them? And my answer was no, because when they're doing the job, if they haven't got the interpreter with them, they can't actually do the job. I'm not being...
And we have this debate sometimes where people like the idea, for instance, of translation in the app, but then we'll say, but I do want them to understand the English. And I think there's a balance. And I think there's two things. One thing is that I think we should be able to train people in a way that the language doesn't matter.
Yeah.
We can use videos, we can use graphics, we can use icons that everybody understands. We can use universal language in a way to demonstrate through video and images what is supposed to happen. And then hopefully everybody can understand it. Because I think we have to enable people to learn in different ways. Some people need to read it, some people need to hear it, some people need to see it, etc. We understand more about learning styles now, but we don't seem to put it into practice. And I think the other thing is that there is a difference between the amount of English that you might need in order to communicate with people if you're like doing security at an event, for instance, but the language that you would need for the technical jargon, if you like, that might be used in a training session and in the manual. So we've had some clients say, actually, I'd be happy for them to have a manual, like in a completely different language, because I want them to be able to absorb the detail. But then I do want them to be able to speak English on the day, but that's different. That's different skill set, really.
You're sitting on the edge of a very big opportunity, which I've been speaking to Marianne about this week, and some other clients as well, which is that we're about to see the introduction in the UK of the Fair Work Agency. This surely is good news in a lot of ways for you.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, what we want to do is very much tie in with that, and actually with Martin's law, with the protect duty law, because I think those two things need to converge. They need to not clash with each other. Because what we want is better work. We want there to be fairer work. We got a grant from the UFI VocTech Trust, and they support vocational tech that impacts workers in a positive way and that leads to better work. So we've been looking at how we do that and how we make sure that means that they get more reliable work, that they get better shifts, that they get paid well. One of the things was that people just weren't getting paid properly because hours weren't being tracked even. I mean, we tracked time and attendance because actually a lot of events that wasn't being tracked properly. And there was just an argument that would take place between the event organizer and all the agencies for about 3 months after the event about what hours people had worked. So people got paid really, really late.
Where's that problem coming from? Where does that stem from?
Stems from a mixture of subcontracting. So an agency then subcontracts a lot of other workers. We had one event where there was so much subcontracting going on that we had workers who were actually getting paid for about 4 agencies for the big shift. And I don't even think it was them trying it on. If you get asked, can you work this big festival at the weekend by 4 different agencies that you work for, you're just going to say yes to them all because you don't know which one's going to come through. Because we would ask people who they're working for and they'd say, I don't know.
Yep.
So
when tech is involved, you
you only have one like digital passport on our system, and we didn't design it to catch people out. We just thought, well, you don't want a million time you work at an event, you just want one again, right? But then we realized that it will tell us if that person's already been allocated to that shift, it can't happen again. So I was having to ring these agencies and say, I'm really sorry, but you thought you had 200 people working this event this weekend, you've only got 75. And I thought they'd hate me forever because I'd lost them business, and they weren't even surprised.
So do they buy into using your?
They do, because what they were saying was actually, we used to have so many problems before because the agency that contracted us would say to us, how many people did you have on site? And we'd say 75, and they'd say, no, you didn't. We only saw 62. And they'd say, no, we did. And then we would just argue about it for weeks. And it's nuts to me that this was even possible. And there'd be hand sign-in sheets, lots of people with similar names that weren't clear. So literally they were hand signing in. And it was taking about 2 hours at some events just to sign the staff in.
I mean, the reason I think it's a good opportunity for you is because there's going to be this big shift from, competency being a sort of nice to have, tick box, thing to you've actually got to prove, like, you haven't just trained this person, but they actually understand that training. And
it's proving that and proving the understanding. Like, we have little quizzes in the app and stuff, so that you're not just tracking what they've read, but actually, you should protect the worker as well, because they, they can prove that they actually did what they were supposed to do, that they did their training, and they can prove it at a future event as well.
I think genuinely, from my experience of seeing all sorts of people want to do the right thing. I mean, yes, you're going to get some people who don't want to. I mean, there is an argument, people say if people aren't being paid a lot. I said, well, I was a waitress at 14 and I wasn't paid a lot, but I still did my job. But it was because I was valued. And I genuinely think if people feel valued and they're doing a job, yes, there's going to be an element of people that don't, fine. But I would say that a lot of people, if they're treated well, they know what they're doing and they feel like they're valued, they're going to do a better job than people that don't. And it just ends up being a bit like a virus then, doesn't it? If you don't feel like you're cared for, if you don't feel like anyone's bothered with you, it's a bit like if you think a rental accommodation or student houses, that sort of thing. If they look awful to begin with, then you're not going to have much respect, are you?
Completely. And, when we did our initial research on this, people who did these roles told us two things. They said, no one tells us anything and no one asks us anything. So I don't know what's going on because no one's told me and everyone's asking me questions and I don't know. And also, like, I've worked on this gate for the last 15 years and I could tell you how to improve the queuing system, but no one asks me.
That's the thing, isn't it? So often, I mean, again, I say in training sessions I deliver, and again, I spoke to someone today and said, very seldom does anybody ever ask me as the trainer that I've got the most intelligence in that, as in like information. I've got precious information that you will never get from anywhere else. No manager will ever get that. I've got that information, but nobody ever asks. Those people, I would then hear all sorts that they were like, well, nobody cares, blah, 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 blah. In the end, I do supervision. I would do staff supervision. Very seldom would it happen, but I said, actually, this pays dividends because they're telling me stuff. They know that I'm going to tell you as well. But you need to, and then actually I'd say, let's work on solving some of these things. I would say to them, okay, this is a problem. Anyone in this room that think that if you got any suggestions, I would then log all of that, who was going to take on responsibility and then what was left over. And I said to the managers, like, they're helping you here. They're literally helping you. You need to capitalize on that because, as you say, they know best.
We first realised the high proportion of dyslexia that I think we'd always sort of felt was the case, but it never really stats on, when I ran a training session on diversity issues at a football club. And loads of the stewards came up to me afterwards and said, when you described what it's like to be dyslexic, I think I am, and I don't know what to do, and I don't know how to be diagnosed. And I was just astonished by the number of people that came up and said that they thought they had some sort of neurodiversity or disability. And I fed that back and said, look, this actually the issue I have isn't with how they're dealing with customers, it's how you're dealing with your workforce.
I know I've seen because I've been approached by a few people to actually then do training for the work. I don't know what you'd call them, employees, but they're not employees necessarily, but the frontline staff on how to deal with people that are neurodivergent. Because again, that's a thing. And again, I would say that most people would want to be equipped to be able to deal with situations. They don't want to be in a situation where, number one, then between the staff, they would understand. There'd be more of an understanding as well, but also then understanding. Because as I say to people, if you, it doesn't seem like it's a big deal, but actually it is. I worked in care, I've done all sorts of things, that if people don't fully understand what's going on, they go into a different mode of they're doing something wrong. And it's like, well, actually, if you learn, somebody argued with me about this the other day and said, yeah, but it possibly is that there's something bad that's going to happen. And I said, yes, but you can't automatically jump to that. If you can't, and actually in the end that can end up causing a problem if you don't deal with that. If you don't fully understand that behavior. I think it's something that is going to need to be looked at. I think it's starting to, but
well, I want to ask Cathy a question on this because I kind of to end today because this is an interesting one. I keep saying to people that with training on neurodivergence, and before that we centered for ages on mental health, which seems to have gone back a little bit in in the scheme of things. But you mentioned near the beginning of this that sometimes you've been treated differently as a woman in a space, etc. And I wonder whether, like, one of the first things that we need to do with people near the top is actually some training on emotional intelligence, and also how people communicate first, before they have any of that other training, because I feel like just like people are not necessarily in the right space to receive any of the rest of it.
I think you're right. And it's about looking around you, isn't it? And seeing who you've got and who you're working with. Because coming back to what Marianne just said, isn't that really interesting that in that environment you're talking about, the assumption was made that that the workers need to be trained in how to deal with neurodivergence, whereas actually they're the people who are more likely to be neurodivergent.
Yeah, totally.
What we need to be doing is helping them.
Doesn't it? Then
how can we help you to learn?
Yeah, like you said, when people don't know, I think it's talked about more, a lot more now it is, and I think for males as well, and I know that security isn't, it's there's more females in it now, but when you've got sectors where it's predominantly, which security and construction it is, I've always found it actually, I don't know what the word would be, amazing, but that's not really the word I want. But if I'm training somebody that's going to be training other people, so whether it's people that are going to be doing SIA training or whether it's people in construction, whatever it is, the way that I work with them, and males that I have had that have said, this is me, like I really struggle. And then so at that moment, when I'm able to get them in a safe space to be able to explore that they probably never explored before, they're not going to but not men aren't going to then discuss it with their friends necessarily. So I found it then becomes a really safe space for them to explore something. And I said, this is where culture change can happen. If you get those people that are going to be working with or training other people, and you make it so that it's not just accepted, but these people are embraced because it's a portion, they don't become a problem, because it isn't actually a problem. And I think it's awful when people then start saying, oh God, like you said, oh, like this. It's like, no,
I think even that friends bit is quite an interesting one. I
we're
think
all different, aren't we? And we learn in different ways. That's the thing.
I think there's a lot of men out there these days that don't even have friends necessarily.
Absolutely.
Right?
Anything where you can give people that chance to either like discuss that or access something in a format that's accessible to them, so they don't feel that shame. Because for whatever reason, I hear a lot of the people that I've worked with say, oh, I was a nightmare at school. And I say, no, the education system failed you. And then as a consequence, things have carried on. But I think a lot of the problem comes, it's not even at the top, it's the in-between bit. I've worked with the fire service a lot, and they said there's so many layers here that actually a lot of the people don't want to go up to here because they're not allowed almost to communicate down here. But these up here are saying, why did nobody tell us? Why did none of my people below here tell us about the things that are going on? I've often found the people right at the top accessible, but you can't actually get to them.
But all the way up, and it doesn't matter where it is, right? All the way up. This is what I'm going back to a minute ago, is you want this stuff to come from a point of people looking for it, not because they have to do it.
Yeah. Yes.
Right? Because when people are looking for it, that I can see that these people over here are probably going to have a problem with the way that this is being communicated, right? And I'm looking for that. I'm looking for the problem, as opposed to, what you've got to do. You've got to do this test with those people over there because there may be an issue. Because that's two very different things. When people go looking for the fact that other people may be different from them, and we communicate differently, and we understand things differently, and that's our headspace right from the beginning. We go looking for, so what might that impact? What are we doing to sort that out? As opposed to, okay, oh, I've got to do that. I've got to do that. Oh, go on then, do it.
It's all
You
very
know?
reactive, though, isn't it? And I think,
Yeah.
like you were saying, that it's so often terrible disasters have to happen. I mean, I use the Manchester Arena one when I say to people about the importance of what I do and how I feel very strongly about some of the SIA training that goes on out there. That, I mean, I got shouted down by somebody that the other day that was sort of complaining about it all, and I said, but I've been approached by somebody, in the sector that's trying to make big changes about the way that training happens. And he said, with all due respect, and I thought, oh dear, I don't think I'm going to like what follows here. Have you done this and that? I thought, well, you're not really asking me a question because you're making the assumption I don't know anything. And I said, but actually, this person has asked me because of my knowledge in terms of my education and my training, but also I have had some experiences, and actually, I've asked, can I go out and sit in? Graham knows, I go and sit in on people's training in those sectors, and I'll go out and experience what those people are going to be experiencing as well. That when you bring people together to make those changes, they can come about, but you have to be sort of open-minded. But yeah, the SIA, I mean, that's another whole thing. But if that's when you see, I say to people, but actually, so I do my bit where I teach somebody to teach. Okay, so I may be teaching somebody that's going to be doing the SIA. You can now do that on e-learning, so you haven't even got the input of a person. You've then got somebody that's done their SIA by maybe a cowboy kind of company. So now we've got somebody that's offering training that did their training on an e-learning platform. They also did their SIA training through a company that was a bit sus as well. And now we've got those people training people that are then going to be working arenas for something that people think isn't a big deal. It now becomes a huge big deal because you've got so many people.
And there's no quality assurance through that process at all. And
I do get on my high horse, but I also think it's important that people that aren't in the sector, whatever being in the sector means, do come in to make those changes. Because I think if you only ever get people that have been in it as well, like you said, you go into other sectors now, and that's a good thing. It's difficult to do it, but I'm sure that you probably make waves in other sectors because you say, well, actually, let me bring over my experience from this.
I think sometimes that's the best thing is when you're not from a sector.
Yeah. We found it with some construction lads. They absolutely love the fact that our experiences from elsewhere because they want to learn from them.
Yeah, I've had the same. I've never worked on a building site or done any of that before. However, the bit that I'm going to do is the bit I know about.
Yeah,
it's the same. You know your stuff, and you know about event management. You know about all that, but you've also heard all the problems, and you're like, okay, let's do something about that. Not let's moan about it continually.
Yeah. Coming back to your point, Graham, I think the thing about how we communicate. I mean, I just think we've all got different styles of learning and listening and taking information in, and we need to understand that that's different. I sometimes think that the word disorder gets used too often. Like we've all got a disorder, and then there's like one white bloke in Switzerland in a beige suit who's like.
Well, Marianne knows my main word for humans is messy. All right.
Yeah.
I don't like other labels, to be honest. I really don't like any other labels. I get them. I know that they're useful for some people. I know that they're useful in terms of getting money and support and enabling people to get what they need. But ultimately, we're just all messy, right? Every single one of us has has our flaws when it comes to the way that we communicate, the way that we think.
I think it's a tricky one because, I posted a video that I made a year after I was diagnosed. So it was 6 years ago. And when Graham, the way that I've approached my diagnosis, I was like, and I talk about it on there. Yes, I was diagnosed. If you want to be, that's great. If you don't. But for me, it was more that I now don't see myself as a problem. Therefore, I exude then to other people when I'm teaching them. It doesn't really matter what you are. Literally own who you are. So for me, that diagnosis did help me go and spread the news, which sounds odd.
To me,
I mean,
that's your order. That's not a disorder. That's your order, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I just say, well, I do,
different. So who decided which one was a disorder and which one was an order? You know what I mean?
Sorry, that's my dog.
They're all different.
And also, if there's that many people that are like, when people say, well, everybody seems to have that now, and I'm saying, well, if everybody has, why are we not doing things
exactly? Maybe
normal?
that is the order. Maybe that's actually the normal, and we didn't realize it, or the norm. But I think as well, I see a lot of things where people are talking about, like, only 2% of investment goes to female-founded businesses, so it's a massive challenge. And people said, well, we're opening our door to women, or we're opening our door to everybody, and the door is open to ethnic minorities, and this, that, and the other. And it's like, I said, what shapes the door? Because it's a little bit like saying that the cat flap is available for the Great Dane. Like, it's not getting in. It's like, it is like the door or the framework is shaped to fit certain people. And it's okay saying open, but if it's the wrong shape, some people aren't going to get through it.
Yeah, you can say that something's accessible. Well, you can say that, I've been to events where, I really struggle. I never thought that I did. I've now worked out I'm an introvert, despite thinking that I was an extrovert for so many years. For me, going to an event, it can look beautiful, it can be amazing, but actually, is it accessible? Well, yeah, we've got this, we've got fidget spinners, or we've got quiet rooms. And I'm like, yeah, but when you welcomed me in, what did you do with me? Like, what happened then? Did you just leave someone in a space? And so often it sort of falls short, I think, because of the tick boxing, instead of actually saying to people, bravely saying, what did you need?
Interestingly enough, you go to this whole thing about neurodiversity and the fact that actually, it's always been there, right? It's kind of always been there. But why are we now, like, noticing this thing and et cetera, et cetera? Part of the reason I think that we're noticing this thing now is because of the policies and procedures and everything that we have put in place, right, in order to make everything safe. Because what we've done is we've put everything into a box. I mean, when I first started my first business, I was allowed at 11 to use a guillotine. I wouldn't be allowed to use it now because, it would be unsafe. But, you didn't think about things like that.
There's real rigidity about the processes and about the, often the training framework, if you like, and the way that people have to learn things. It's become so rigid that actually it does only suit a very narrow number of people.
But don't you think, though, that my son helps out at church coffee morning, and he makes the tea, does the coffees and stuff like that. And then the lady that runs it said, we can't now. Something had happened. It wasn't anything major. It was something on the floor. And I said, but he can. I said, you just do a risk assessment. You don't just say he can't. And they won't let him now. And I said, but that's because the person that's organising that doesn't fully understand. And I said,
this is it, isn't it? That's the way that the world works.
If you do a risk assessment, it's not saying no. It's just saying things like, maybe we sign something to say, yes, we're happy that he's sensible enough, he can do it. Anything that happens, we take responsibility. So, like you say, I think the policies and procedures are great if the people that implement them fully understands.
And they can be used as an excuse for, I don't think that's...
But that's the world that I came from, which was that when someone had the label, the thing that you did was you then made an adjustment. The whole wording behind that is that something's right and we're kind of making an adjustment for somebody that's got a label, right? And that's why I prefer messy, because if we're all messy, then actually can't we just see the fact that ultimately, maybe when we put together that policy and procedure in the way that we did it in the first place, we excluded certain people from how that could be accessed because it didn't suit everybody.
Somebody said something recently I hadn't heard for ages, which was like apologized for swearing in front of a woman. And I thought, I'm really glad I haven't heard anyone do that for a long time, because it used to really annoy me, because working in very male-dominated environments, I would get it a lot from sort of old school men who would say, like, they would swear or whatever, or make somebody joke or whatever. And then they'd go, oh, I'm sorry about that. I shouldn't have said that.
Don't worry about that.
Really? Yeah, exactly. But I would really get to it, because what they're doing is they're saying, oh, I'm going to have to adjust my behavior because you're here. And they're telling me I'm the problem and that they've got to adjust their behavior. And I think, look, I don't care how much you swear. Like, you obviously don't know me if you think that's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
For some weird reason, believe that you shouldn't swear in front of people of a particular gender, then don't swear in front of them. But don't do it and then apologize. And I think it's that same theme of like making you into the problem.
Because then if you were offended, irrespective of your gender, you've then said, oh, yes, I was offended, but it will be assumption it's because you're female, not because you just didn't like swearing.
It's like, don't you know, I feel embarrassed by it because I think, I know you sort of pointed out that somehow everyone has to modify their behavior because I'm here. It's like, oh, it's excruciating.
Yeah, there we go. Wouldn't it be great, folks, if we could live in a world with less assumptions, as I've always saying. But what a great conversation. Thank you so much, Cathy, for coming along. And
so which other sectors do you just quickly know? I know, Graham, because of the time. What other sectors do you, so music?
So music, any sort of live events like festivals, carnivals, football matches, any sport, and now transport and construction as well. Because actually the themes are the same really around anywhere where it's people where there's a lot of temporary workers.
Love it.
They need to speak to you more, I think.
Yeah. Anything to do with music's a good thing.
Yeah.
Spring the
anyway,
we love
a crowded space, so you know it's good for the soul to be able to get together in crowds, and we should be able to do it safely.
Well, when we were playing, my son was playing drums, which you probably heard. Partway through, I realised he was playing drums in the house. So yeah, he went to a concert. He's going to the Mogos next week.
There you go. Well, I hope they're safe. That's all I'm saying.
I'll get him to look.
Yeah,
get Cathy involved just to make sure. There we go. Sure. Listen, folks, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching this. If you're watching it on catch up, thanks for doing that as well. If anything that we've talked about today in today's conversation has struck a chord and you want to get in touch with Cathy or any of us, do just give us a little message on any of the platforms that we're on, and we'll respond to you as soon as we can. If not, we'll be back talking to somebody else on the Source of the Source soon. Say that with your teeth out. Until next time, bye from all of us. Bye-bye.